dear Lord. Dear Lord, thank you for this day that we may come together virtually to encourage one another and to worship you. Please be with our hearts and minds that we may take your word that's going to be taught here today into our hearts and understand it. Please be with Micah as he presents the lesson. Let him have a ready recollection of your word. Please be with all of us during this time of fear and uncertainty. Please let it pass quickly. And dear Lord, thank you for all the many blessings you've given us. Thank you for keeping us safe. Thank you most of all for your Son who came to this earth and died for us. Pray all this in his most holy name. Be your will. Amen.
To unmute, and the YouTube is going. All right, good morning, everyone. As John said, I'm very glad that we have a chance to be together. This has been an interesting but rewarding experience, and I'm glad we're able to keep things moving with a facade of normalcy. As we've been looking this month, or really throughout the year, we're dealing with the idea of image bearers. The fact that we as humans, we were created in the image of God, which means we're created to look like God. The character that we exhibit is supposed to look like God. And so this month, we're focusing on that image as it relates to the idea of leadership. So Andrew started us off looking at who Jesus was and his demonstration of leadership. And then Fred took us through what leadership looks like within the family unit. And so today, we're going to sort of take a whirlwind tour through leadership in this family unit, looking through leadership as it relates to the church family. And I really appreciated some of the points that both the men brought out, but the analogy that I heard Andrew make, that there's a difference between leadership and management. They can be related. You can have somebody who is doing both things, but the way he put it, if I'm hopefully summarizing correctly, is that management is having a goal and then making sure that multiple people work to accomplish that goal. Leadership is looking for the path a person should be on and helping them to go along that path. Those two can go together, but don't always. And what we're called to, really, is leadership. Looking out for the right path people are to be on and helping to guide them along it. And so I want to look at a passage that Andrew dealt with in Matthew chapter 20. And we'll be ping-ponging around a little bit of the New Testament as we do this. Matthew chapter 20, verses 25 to 28. But Jesus called them to himself, talking about the disciples, and said, "You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and those who are great exercise authority over them. Yet it shall not be so among you. But whoever desires to become great among you, let him be your servant. And whoever desires to be first among you, let him be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many." Obviously, Andrew dealt with this when looking at Jesus setting the example, that he, as Lord of all creation, who had every right to lord over us, and does, his time on earth was spent in service. It was spent helping others in both physical and, most importantly, in spiritual problems, and helping them to overcome the challenges they were facing and putting them on the right path. A path of destruction is where they were, and he brought them to a path of righteousness. And he says that it's supposed to be the same for those in the church. That those that are going to be great, those that are going to be rulers, are actually servants. They're the ones who watch out for and take care of each other. And so the first area of leadership in the church is those we think of as leaders who have an office of leadership. So specifically, we want to think about elders in this topic. Let's turn over to Hebrews chapter 13. You will get to hear my pages turning. Hebrews chapter 13, because I had no way to also have my electronic notes up in front of me with everything else I have running. Hebrews 13 and verse 17. "Obey those who rule over you and be submissive, for they watch out for your souls, as those who must give account. Let them do so with joy and not with grief, for that would be unprofitable for you." Again, I see this passage talking about elders, evangelists, basically people in spiritual leadership roles, as we would call them. And he's saying what their job is. He does use the word rule, but again, looking back at what Christ said, it's not a position of look how many followers I can get. It's a position of shepherding, a position of watching out for the well-being of others. They are supposed to be watching out for their souls. They're supposed to be seeing the state of the souls around them and trying to make sure that's the best state it can be. That if a soul is having struggles, is having problems, they want to guide it into righteousness. They want to guide that person back to looking like God, back to having the spirit that God wants people to have. And as it says here, these people have to give an account, or as ones who must give an account. So this is a big responsibility that they take on. But the concept there of watching out for the souls of brethren, I don't think is exclusive to elders, to evangelists. Really, when you look at most of the things that they are called to do, while they may have a special responsibility to do it, all of these qualities, all of these actions are ones that Christians in general should be doing. It's sort of the character of Christians that we see exemplified in them. So the rest of the time, I'm just going to be looking at different passages of people demonstrating or being called to lead brethren. And it doesn't relate strictly to evangelists and to elders, but principles that we all need to follow. Let's turn now to Hebrews chapter 10, just a few pages back. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 24. And let us consider one another in order to stir up love and good works. So this passage I think of and use a lot because in the first 10 Days as a Christian series, this is the passage that our segment that Anna and I help lead is on. And so I go over this verse a lot. And the point of this passage is really saying that we are supposed to help our brethren fulfill our role as Christians. If we think about looking like God, about having a character that's like God's, then love and good works is a lion's share of what makes that up. And this passage is saying that we're supposed to be carefully thinking about our brethren and how we can promote them into doing love, to doing good works. We're supposed to be watching out for them and helping to bring them more, spurring them on to having a Christian lifestyle, to having a godly lifestyle, more succinctly. And the careful consideration that's necessary because you're trying to do the best for them. So obviously, you can tell someone that they're doing something wrong, or tell someone, hey, you need to do this thing to be living rightly. And if you don't do it the right way, if you don't do it with any concern, if you don't do it with any deliberation, that can come across the wrong way. I think this ties in with what we were speaking about in class, about provoking children to anger. That could be a subset of this, that not carefully considering how to promote to love and good works it can prevent you from accomplishing that goal. So careful consideration of guiding others into love and good works, into the image of God. Let's go ahead and turn now to 1 Timothy chapter 4. In 1 Timothy 4, I want to look at verse 12. And Paul here is speaking to Timothy, so he's serving as an evangelist with a church family. But again, the principles, I think, easily extend to all of us. Let no one despise your youth, but be an example to the believers in word, in conduct, in love, in spirit, in faith, in purity. So again, he's just telling Timothy what to do, what Timothy needs to do in his own life, the actions he's supposed to exemplify in his own daily walk. But he's doing that as an example to others. He's doing that to help out brethren. And so while in the first case of spurring one another on to love and good works, that sounds like something that would have a lot of conversation be involved, a lot of deliberation in telling them, hey, this is how you should live. This is an example of living the right way to show them how to live. He's supposed to show the brethren what godly living looks like. He's supposed to exemplify the image of God, and that is supposed to be a benefit to the brethren around him. That is supposed to be something that builds them up and encourages them. We see something similar in Titus chapter 2. And I didn't know where best to trim this section, so it'll be a bit longer. Let's read Titus chapter 2, verses 1 through 8. But as for you, speak the things which are proper for sound doctrine, that the older men be sober, reverent, temperate, sound in faith, in love, in patience. The older women likewise, that they be reverent in behavior, not slanderers, not given to much wine, teachers of good things, that they admonish the young women to love their husbands, to love their children, to be discreet, chaste, homemakers, good, obedient to their own husbands, that the word of God may not be blasphemed. Likewise exhort the young men to be sober-minded, in all things showing yourself to be a pattern of good works, in doctrine showing integrity, reverence, incorruptibility, sound speech that cannot be condemned, that one who is an opponent may be ashamed, having nothing evil to say of you. There's obviously a lot of instruction there on things people need to be working in for living as Christians, for living under God. But two things I wanted to bring out are first the example set by older women. They are supposed to be going out and helping out younger women, and again, showing them what living in a godly way looks like, instructing them on how best to live in this godly way, admonishing them, as my translation says. And then we go to Titus, having similar instruction to what Timothy received, that he's supposed to, in his conduct and in his speech, demonstrate what godliness looks like. That he's supposed to be teaching all these people how to live and showing them how to live through his actions. And I realize now that I'm basically repeating myself. That at a high level, if we're looking at the principle of what leadership looks like, it's looking out for brethren and helping to guide their souls on the right path. And that's, again, something that we're all called to. It's not just the responsibility of elders to see someone who is struggling, someone who has more growth to do, and to help encourage them to do it. If I see a brother who's struggling, if I see a brother who needs to learn, and I refuse to step up to do that, well, obviously, I'm not exemplifying leadership, but I'm not really showing the love I'm supposed to show either as a Christian. I want to look at one more passage in James chapter 5 that sort of ties this together. In James chapter 5, I want to look at verses 19 and 20. Brethren, if anyone among you wanders from the truth, and someone turns him back, let him know that he who turns a sinner from the error of his way will save a soul from death and cover a multitude of sins. This passage jumped to my mind in preparation for this lesson because of Andrew's example or definition of what leadership is, of turning one back, of guiding someone from an incorrect path to a correct path. And that's leadership. And that's something that can be done by a young Christian, by an elder, by anyone in between, recognizing the needs of brethren and reaching out to help them so that godliness is the result, so that love and good works is something we're being promoted into, something that we're being stirred up to do. And so I don't have specific examples. I don't have anecdotes, the really useful ones that both Fred and Andrew used. I think I focused more on the high-level principle. Our goal is to be leaders, not that everyone has just trying to get their own following, but that everyone is looking out for the best interest of their brethren. Everyone is looking to their brethren, looking to the state of their souls, and trying to guard them, trying to protect them, trying to build them up so that we're all going along the same path towards godliness, towards being image bearers. And that's the lesson I have for us. If we go away and we don't look out for brethren, if we focus primarily on ourselves, we're not growing into maturity, we're not helping brethren out, we're not demonstrating love, and leadership in a Christ-like sense is service to one another for godliness. So, if there's anyone that is struggling with those things, if there's anyone that has the obvious needs that they recognize, don't hesitate to make a change in your life. If you're not walking in a way that promotes love, promotes good works, that shows the image of God, turn back into that. And if you've not given your life to Christ, I urge you to make that decision, to make that commitment. Allow His leadership to turn you onto the right path, and then start sharing that benefit to others. Thank you all very much for your attention this morning.